Good afternoon and welcome to my very first YouTube ink review. We will be taking a quick look at an ink by Waterman called Rose Éclat or Radiant Pink. This is an ink that is interestingly only available in Europe and is only available in short international cartridges. If you live outside of Europe, you're out of luck because I actually really like this ink. Now, the way this review is structured is we'll be taking a look at a number of tests I did on different kinds of paper, and alongside with that I will give you my likes and my dislikes, the strong points and weak points of this ink, and hopefully this will be helpful for you to decide whether or not you like this ink and if you're interested in buying some of it. All tests were done in this lovely Jinhao X450, which is, as most Jinhaos, fairly wet, fairly broad. It's a bit drier than other Jinhaos I have used, but still wet enough to give you a rough idea of how it will perform in your pen of choosing. When we take a look at the sample I made, you can see my first dislike about this ink, but it's a pretty major one. Is actually that the color does look more like a purple to me than it does like a pink. So if you're looking for a soft pink feminine color, you might look elsewhere. But if you like this color, I highly recommend it because in the following minutes you will see that the performance is pretty great of this one and at a low price, like most Waterman inks. First paper that we have is Clairefontaine Triomphe, 90 grams per square meter. As you can see, the color here is more purple than it is pink, but if we look at the reverse writing, so we simulated a finer nib, it does look more like a pink to me. And this is also what I have experienced while using it for the past couple of weeks, is that in a fine nib it does look more like a pink than it does in a very wet nib. So this is something to take into consideration. But you can also see that, color or not, the performance is pretty great. Not a lot of shading, which is a shame if you look for this, but it also a very flashy color. This does the name it has, Radiant Pink, some justice. So, as I said, great performance, no bleed whatsoever, to be expected from Clairefontaine, of course. Dry time is pretty standard for your Waterman, pretty on the wet side, but this also means it has a great flow to it, like most Waterman inks. Water test, well, no, this won't survive scuba diving, but random encounter with rain might be able to survive it. But if you're looking for a waterproof ink, this is not it. Next up is Oxford leather paper, one of my favorite papers. Again, great performance. This is very thin paper, but again, no bleed through. Dry time is a bit longer, but water test is still terrible. Well, not terrible, but not a waterproof ink whatsoever. Next up is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter. Again, you can see more of a purple than it is a pink in the broad nib, but in the fine it is roughly a pink. Great performance again, no bleed, no spread. Standard dry time for Waterman. Again, not really waterproof. Now if we move on to Atoma, which is a Belgian type of paper, it uses these little rings to swap in and swap out paper. I believe the US has a similar brand that does that. When we move down the spectrum of paper qualities, you can see there is some bleed through, and this is actually the only problem with performance I've noticed in Radiant Pink, is that on in wetter nibs and on crappier paper it has a tendency to bleed through, but still not a lot of spread, still very much readable. Dry time is a lot shorter on this paper, a lot more absorbent, explains the bleed through as well, of course, and the water test is pretty great on this one. You can actually read this by just flipping over the paper. But yeah, I don't know if it would give these good results in smaller writing. Now if we move on to Moleskine Cahier paper, still pretty great performance, but the bleed is pretty terrible on this one. So as I said, it can bleed through on crappier paper. Water test is pretty terrible on this one, but again, dry time very fast because it is of course absorbent paper. Now if we move on to the the worst paper I could find in my collection, even on this one, the performance for a wet nib on crappy paper, this is pretty great actually. You can very much read it, and you can actually spot almost no spread. But there is definitely some bleed through. Dry time is again fast on this paper. Water test not so great. As you can see, for one last time, not a lot of shading if you're looking for that. So my conclusion, if you like what you saw and you don't need a lot of shading, this is definitely one to consider because it is cheap and performance is pretty great even on bad paper. But if you're looking for an interesting shading ink with a lot of sheen and halo and whatnot in a more feminine light pink color, you might look elsewhere because this is not it. But if you like the color you saw, I would highly recommend this one. It is one of my favorite inks currently. So if you have liked this review, definitely do not forget to subscribe, and if you didn't like it, please tell me why, because of course your feedback will help me improve these videos in the future. So that was Waterman Radiant Pink. Hopefully we'll see you in the future, and thanks for watching, and goodbye.